an organization dedicated to Vietnam for the past half a century, from the fierce days of war through the period of renovation and development in peacetime, giving support in fields from health, education to projects in community development or climate change adaptation, bringing positive changes to around 2 million people in vulnerable circumstances. The organization also became the first foreign NGO in Vietnam to receive Vietnam State President's Friendship Medal on 4 different occasions. That organization is Medical Committee Netherlands Vietnam, or MCNV, a symbol of friendship between the Netherlands and Vietnam.
Hello there, you're back here on another edition of Talk Vietnam. Today we're honored to welcome to our studio 2 featured guests who will share with us more about the Medical Committee Netherlands Vietnam, also known short as MCNV. During the past 5 decades, MCNV has grown into an organization that has bridged the Netherlands and Vietnam through a story of compassion and friendship. Our featured guests today are Ad Spijkers and Ron Marchand, who will share more with us about the organization. Thank you both so much for joining us here today. Ad and Ron, could you please introduce yourselves for our audience of Talk Vietnam?
Thank you very much for this occasion. My name is Ad Spijkers. I came to your country in 1976 when I was working already for 7 years with MCNV, which is an organization basically helping Vietnam in those days, in difficult days of during the war where the bombs were falling. After my time with MCNV, I was also still associated with the Ministry of Health for the invitation of many medical doctors and pharmacists who came to work in and study in the Netherlands. And my basic role was also to coordinate the activities of the Dutch universities and MCNV for the realization of the Dutch Halan Vietnam Hospital in Dong Ha.
Yes. Thank you. And what about you?
I came here far after the war in 1987, the first time in Hanoi, working for the same university collaboration as Ad was talking about for about 3 years. And then I got in touch with MCNV, and at that time there was a big problem with malaria, and they asked me to come in to work for MCNV to work on that problem. And I thought that time it would be nice for 3 or 4 years, but I stayed 25 years.
Wow, yes. For you both, do you remember the days when your interest in Vietnam began, and how did it begin?
Yeah, that was in the end of the 60s. We call May 68 was a bit of a turning point in Europe and in the USA, I have to say, where many people, especially young people, were worried what was going on in the world. I remember in those days that we saw films on TV in the Netherlands of French filmmakers who had filmed how the Vietnamese in their war for freedom and independence made use of their bicycle. And that was for us a big inspiration. And that is why we started with our activity Bicycle for Vietnam.
Yes.
It had basically two functions. When there was an emergency and there was no light for a medical doctor, that with a double dynamo, we could put the bike up, a stand, and then pedal so you could make the dynamo generate electricity.
Amazing.
And a group of students in our university had built a special TL lamp who could, with a bit of force, you could have enough electric power to get it on and to keep it on for quite some time. And yeah, you have to pedal then half an hour, 1 hour, but that was the idea. If we send to Vietnam, at least we know the Vietnamese are doing this already. It must be a good thing, and we will just give them more of the same examples. Yes. The other thing that we thought also that as transportation was very difficult, and we had seen also that the transportation of rice or agricultural produce often was done with bags on the bike. And these pictures we have seen, the pictures we are used also to print them on posters and on other papers. So you say if you buy this piece of paper, you can buy a share of 5 guilders for the Action Bicycles for Vietnam.
Yes.
Nou, dit is dan de medische fiets. voorzien van een dubbele dynamo.
This is the medical bicycle equipped with 2 dynamos generators and a light for emergency situations.
Hiernaast is de transportfiets.
In addition, there were specialized bicycles to transport goods and food. They carried 4 bags of rice as heavy as 200 pounds kilos.
Deze beide fietsen die worden in Nijmegen gemaakt door de fietsencoöperatie De Eendracht.
Both types of bicycles were made in Nijmegen City and were part of the bicycle campaign for Vietnam's liberation movement.
In Amsterdam werden de medische
About 100 bicycles were sent to support Vietnam and immediately applied creatively in transportation and surgery. In its first few years, MCNV focused on medication, medical equipment and essential necessities for the Vietnamese. A series of campaigns for obtaining bicycles, sewing machines and emergency rubber boats for Vietnam were carried out alongside anti-war activities and calls for supporting Vietnam throughout the Netherlands. MCNV raised several millions dollars per year in its first phase, receiving contributions from tens of thousands of Dutch residents and politicians. These activities provided strong support for the unification of Vietnam and during the reconstruction of the country.
A footage of you, Ad, was in the Institute, the Netherlands Institute for Sound and Vision. It shows you working during the time when you were 23 years old. Do you recall that time when you were so young, already working for the cause of MCNV?
It is made in the Tropical Institute in Amsterdam. I remember it was March 1972. Where important professors and scientists from Germany, from Holland, they were really giving very impressive information about what was going on in Vietnam. I'm still today very grateful and very much respectful to Professor De Haas, yes. Dr. Van Rijn and Dr. Groening, who took the initiative to mobilize 600 medical doctors and pharmacists in a very powerful committee of recommendation. And in our society, our culture, a medical doctor has also a bit of an authority and people are listening to them. And the good thing was also it was a humanitarian vision we had. We were above the politics and we wanted to do something concrete. And it started small with collecting medicines which were given from the pharmacy industry to the doctor practice. We collected that. But also the money which was used to buy antibiotics, to buy milk powder, yes. To buy quinine for the malaria patients. And that was growing to something quite big, and that was at hospital in Dong Ha.
Yes. For you, Ron, was your experience and your knowledge of Vietnam also through hearing about the war that happened here?
Yes, Vietnam had already a very special meaning and feeling for us because just like Ad, and I think many of our donors of MCNV were raised in the young years of teenagers. Every evening on television we saw pictures in the news about the war in Vietnam. And I never experienced the war, my parents did, but we were very surprised, well, what is going on here and why is this happening? I have not been a volunteer of MCNV directly, but I have attended some of their meetings when I was a student, and we did all kinds of other actions as well for MCNV. Of course, just demonstrations, because we were mostly motivated to go against our own government, actually, to not support the war in Vietnam, which the Americans were carrying out.
We are trying, as much as possible on humanitarian ground to advocate that this was an unjust war, should be ended, and we could only raise our voice in the streets. That was good, but please do something concrete. And that, I think, was the very practical approach of Professor De Haas, the founder of the MCNV, who say we will not go there, but we send material which the Vietnamese are needing. I remember the film of the first 15 years of MCNV. That was a big meeting in Amsterdam in '83. By that day, there was already 100 million guilders collected for Vietnam, which is quite impressive.
With positive achievements, MCNV retains the trust from supporters they have maintained over the decades.
Wacht, ik ga deze eens even gieten.
Suze van Herkent is one of the 70,000 individual donors who have been with MCNV since its establishment. Since 1968, she has still been receiving reports on the organization's activities. On each annual visit to Vietnam, she has the chance to directly witness life in Vietnam and help other donors understand more about the country they are supporting.
The minorities living in the mountains, which is always difficult. And so the MCNV often works now in the minority communities. And I think that's very useful work. And with limited means, they reach a lot of people, as long as it exists.
I was called on the phone by a lady who said, I wanted to ask you, I always give like €5 per month, but how do you feel about when I go down to €4 per month? And so I said, you can do that, of course, but she said, well, I have a small pension and I don't want to quit. I also have 26 other good causes like NGOs that I support, but they all go. I want to stay with MCNV. They found the MCNV very important, and they were very convinced of that we did good things with the money. And so many donors stay for 30, 40, and even 50 years. Yeah, very loyal, and that's a very nice feeling.
As we said, over the years, there have been many donors who have supported MCNV for a long time. Can you tell us about some of these donors?
Actually, some of those donors really donated until the last of their lives and even put MCNV in their last will. Oh. So if they have an inheritance, they will allocate at least one part to MCNV. And MCNV has had several in the last years, and that is increasing, of course, because the donors get older.
Let's talk about the hospital project, Bệnh viện Hà Lan. You spent about 2 years working on that project along with MCNV. Tell us about how it began and the challenges in kind of, funding a whole hospital here in Vietnam.
Yeah, that was what you say, a challenge. All the elements for the building would have been produced in the Netherlands, would be put in crates and be ready to put on a ship to Haiphong. But the equipment was necessary, and for that we had this link with the university circles. They decided, as a first token of support to the Vietnamese people, to give a helping hand to MCNV for the realization of this hospital. And the Vietnamese were very serious. I remember that they sent 3 qualified technicians from Hanoi, engineers. They came by plane to the Netherlands. They stayed for 2-3 weeks. Yes. They studied the whole technical part, and it went back. And after the shipment was sent by truck from Haiphong to Dong Ha, again in difficult conditions, because Dong Ha was in the midst of Quang Tri. That was a kind of a moon landscape. It's a lot of damage after the war.
And much more difficult back then.
Very difficult, but that showed the determination of and the courage of the Vietnamese people also, that to win the war is something, but to gain the peace is also very important. And
exactly.
We felt that this hospital was a kind of a symbol of the friendship and the cooperation between the two people.
More than 40 years ago, this was a prefabricated hospital with 280 beds built by MCNV for Quang Tri residents.
I worked 2 years on this hospital.
Oh, that is special. So, and we were the first twin who was born here.
Cái mẹ chuyển dạ hoặc là mang thai một người đã là khó rồi, mà đây là mang 2 mầm non. Cái phức tạp của sinh đôi rất nhiều biến chứng. Chúng tôi theo dõi và quyết định là giác hút. Từ khi lấy được cháu Lan ra thì cháu Lan bị ngạt tím. Tôi đưa cháu Lan ra hút đờm giải trong mũi, trong miệng, và tôi hà hơi thổi ngạt cho cháu khoảng 5 đến 10 phút, và kích thích ở mông cháu thì cháu bắt đầu mới thở và khóc. Chúng tôi rất mừng, là coi như thế là mẹ tròn con vuông.
Từ khi có cái bệnh viện Hà Lan, Việt Nam khánh thành năm 1977 thì có điều kiện trang thiết bị và có đầy đủ 28 khoa phòng đã điều trị tốt cho bệnh nhân trong thời gian 10-15 năm. Nhưng bệnh nhân bị mất máu, có khi truyền đến 3-4 lít máu vẫn có điều kiện truyền được và cứu sống bệnh nhân. Nhiều bệnh nhân bị tai nạn bom nguyên, có khi là một lúc 5-7 ca mà cứu sống được.
Ha Lan Hospital has completed its historic mission. A new hospital of a larger scale has replaced it. But the love of the locals for the hospital that served them for so long has never ended.
Thế là khi hai cháu ra thì khỏe mạnh, thì bình thường là vui mừng thôi. Về là hai vợ chồng lối cuốn đấy. Tôi bảo thì để hai đứa mình đặt tên gì được. Nhưng mà thôi bây giờ mình đẻ mình về Hà Lan. Để Hà Lan là ý nghĩa nhất. Nên là Lan Hà Lan là hai chị em lót nhau.
After graduation, Ha Lan and Lan Ha decided to work for MCNV in Quảng Trị province. They see it as a way to pay it forward.
Hai chị em đã làm việc với tổ chức y tế Hà Lan Việt Nam hơn 10 năm. Rất là hạnh phúc vì đã được làm ở một cái môi trường như vậy, làm ở một cái tổ chức đã là tài trợ cho bệnh viện Hà Lan là nơi mình sinh ra, một cái sự trả ơn nhỏ, đồng thời là một cái niềm tự hào rất là lớn và tiếp tục là thế hệ tiếp nối cái sứ mệnh hỗ trợ của người dân Hà Lan đến người dân Việt Nam.
During the rest of the war, until 1975, how did MCNV continue to support the Vietnamese people?
That was by collecting money. That was also by lobbying with, because we were lucky that in those days we had a Labour government in power, and the minister of that government, he was quite open-minded. He was a young man, 32 years old, and he decided, I remember on a Saturday evening when we were invited for a discussion, he decided to donate 1 million guilders.
Wow.
To the hospital project in Doha.
Regarding the importance of MCNV during the wartime, I think it can't have been so big, because Holland is a very small country, 1/10 of Vietnam. The number of people, 1/5 of Vietnam. What could a small group, a limited group in Holland do in reality? But I think maybe what we hear later is that at least it gave a lot of moral support to a group of Vietnamese, especially in the health sector, and this prolonged also after the war. After the war we started to continue to work in Vietnam and with Vietnam, we found an enormous enthusiasm to work with foreigners, and they were happy with any amount of attention or support they could get, even if it was very small.
During its 50 years of operation, MCNV has approached thousands of villages, from rural to urban areas of Vietnam. About 100 million euros have been given, supported to bring positive changes for more than 2 million vulnerable people. More than 7,000 health officers, educators and social workers have been able to improve their skills through trainings in the country and abroad. More than 100 health professionals have been trained in the Netherlands. Around 70,000 Dutch donors have continuously donated since the organization was founded.
Do you remember the feeling of of seeing the country that you had seen, you know, for the last, back then it was the last 15 years that you had seen this country on television, seeing the ravages of war, and then you were finally now in Vietnam, and it was peacetime.
I have lived here also 6 years when I was employed with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. And yeah, then I was part of that post-war effort, how we get the economy running, how we get agriculture running, which you know very well, the first 10 years very difficult between 75 and 85. But after that, impressive changes. But of the war, I remember very well these craters everywhere when you had the plane fly to the south, and which is now changed to healthy green paddy fields. And like in our country after the war also, we lack everything, fuel, medicines, electricity, fertilizer. And that was the hardship for Vietnamese, I believe. So Vietnam had very little outside help. I remember when I walked here, there was no World Bank, there was no IMF.
Yes.
So to overcome all these difficulties is quite impressive. But in fact, and Ron knows that better than me, there was in NUFIC, this Netherlands University Foundation for International Cooperation, there was this medical leg, but we had also a technical leg and an agriculture leg. So
okay.
those, I think, still believe is the base for what happened later between the two countries.
Before I came to MCNV had already, after the hospital more or less, they focused on tuberculosis program to set up together with Vietnamese experts on that a new national tuberculosis control program. But because malaria was one of the other big social diseases, as you can call it. I mean, people infect each other and mosquitoes, and so the Dutch support went also for a large part to the national malaria control program already in the 80s, which consisted also mainly in materials. So sending a lot of even cars, office equipment, but also a lot of medicines and DDT for spraying the houses.
Exactly. You would eventually spend about 25 years, you know, working for MCNV's efforts in kind of malaria control here in Vietnam. Do you recall those days when MCNV first started working in malaria here in Vietnam, how the situation was? How was malaria plaguing the country?
When I entered Vietnam, there was a big outbreak of malaria, not only in the areas where it has always been, like in the central region, but even up until the north in Hoa Binh and even north of here, there were a lot of malaria cases. And this was in spite of all the DDT spraying and what they did. So this method was failing now. It was not effective anymore. And then when I was working for the university, I remembered my old profession was in malaria research and malaria control. And so I thought, oh, we should really help, MCNV should really help Vietnam more with finding an alternative for the DDT. And then MCNV asked me to do that. I mean, please do it, come in. And
yes.
Yeah. So that's when we started with the impregnated mosquito nets.
Khỏe. Tuyệt vời. Anh khỏe đi ạ. Anh khỏe. Thế rồi gì ạ? Anh không đi. Vẫn như ngày xưa đúng không? Không gì tuyệt vời. Nhưng cũng già đi đấy. Cũng già đi đấy. Tinh thần không già vậy.
Vào cuối những năm 80 và đầu những năm 90 thì sốt rét quay trở lại Việt Nam trên một diện rất rộng toàn quốc. Và khi đó là đỉnh cao của sốt rét cao nhất, đó là vào năm 1991 với hơn 4.000 người chết do sốt rét và khoảng trên dưới 2 triệu ca mắc sốt rét. Cho nên là mà lúc bấy giờ thì nhu cầu vật tư về phòng chống sốt rét của chúng ta rất là giới hạn. cho nên rất cần một cái sự viện trợ hoặc là sự giúp đỡ của bên ngoài cho cái chương trình quốc gia phòng chống sốt rét. Dù là rất nhỏ hoặc là rất là ít nhưng rất là quý. Rôn trực tiếp xuống đến tận thôn bản, ngủ lại thôn bản, xem người dân người ta ngủ màn như thế nào, và cũng lại cùng với cán bộ côn trùng là đi bắt muỗi và cùng với cán bộ dịch tễ lấy cái lam xét nghiệm máu ấy. Thì đấy là một cái biện pháp hoặc là một cái phương pháp mà trực tiếp, cho nên tất cả mọi người tham gia với dự án cũng rất là thích. Sau 2 năm thí điểm và đánh giá thì thấy rằng biện pháp này rất có hiệu quả và rất tốt, và người dân có thêm một cái thói quen nữa là thói quen ngủ màn. Thay đổi cái behavior là một cái việc rất là lớn. Tỷ lệ mắc và tỷ lệ sốt rét hoặc là tỷ lệ tử vong giảm đi rất nhiều, và dân thì là rất là mừng.
During those days of working with malaria control, how difficult was it, and what were some of the memories during this time that you were working on this project?
I think the period to go with my colleagues from the Malaria Institute into the far remote areas to start to look how we could set up projects was one of the best times of my whole life. I mean, I've always been wanted to be a biologist who not only work in a laboratory or in an office, but work really in the mud and become wet and dirty, and well, that was very much the case. So I remember when our first trips into Zalai and Kontum, how often we were stuck with the car on very small roads. Yes. With big mud, and we had to ask people from the village to help us, to push us out and things like that. It was very hard, yes, but also very much fun.
What changed after the program was launched, would you say? How did it progress after that?
Well, we set up the district scale trials in the 1990, 91, 92. After that, the malaria went really down in the northern trial in Nghệ and as well in Long An. In the middle, in the central region, Phu Yen, it was a little bit doubtful how well the mosquito nets worked. But all our colleagues, our partners from the 3 malaria institutes, one in Hanoi, one in Quy Nhon, and one in Ho Chi Minh City, were already convinced that yes, nets, that is. And right in that time, 93, 94, all kinds of other international support approached Vietnam, like the World Bank and EU and Red Cross, and they asked the Vietnamese health staff, what do you need? And they said, mosquito nets. So actually I was very surprised that already 6 or 7 years after we started to try out the nets, there were already 10 million people in the malaria areas sleeping under those mosquito nets.
For you, Ron, over the years, what have kept you so bonded to Vietnam?
I could do my profession here in a very satisfactory way. You got a lot of support from the Vietnamese. If they see your idea and they agree with it, they multiply it 10 times, 100 times, and they were so enthusiastic working. And the enthusiasm and the ambition of people made it very easy to work here, very nice to work here. It really became my second home country. There's not any other country where I feel as at home as in Holland, as in Vietnam. What kept me so long is also very important, the fact that I worked for MCNV. After the 2004, 2003, malaria was not a real big problem anymore, and our organization said, now our other problems are coming forward, don't work so much on malaria anymore. So I had to change also again. And I was very happy that the organization made it possible for me to develop a new program for direct poverty alleviation in a mountain area where we had been working already for a long time on malaria. Malaria was down, but people were still poor.
Yes, exactly.
So we have to do something else.
For you, Ad, is your connection to Vietnam the same?
It goes even a step further down.
A step further, yes.
My wife is from here, so I got married in 1987, 31 years ago. So I have been back and forward all those days and all those years, and I have seen indeed, as Ron described, many impressive changes. But still, we have to think about the next generations and the generations after. And I just mentioned from 48 million to 92 million, and in 2025, 100 million people.
Yes.
That means also a big pressure on the environment, on the water, on the food, on the energy. I have seen it in many countries. To get fund for good project work is not easy. We have this solid group in MCNV of elder people who give very confident every month some money, but one day that will also get finished. And,
exactly.
That is something for MCNV, and Ron knows it also, to think about what is next. And I was very pleased also to see that in the last meeting there was a representative of USAID. They have now discovered MCNV as a good organization to work with, and that's, I think, very important for them. But I would say also in Vietnam itself there are quite a bit of this charity initiatives of people who want to do something for other Vietnamese, that maybe also MCNV could link up with them.
As of 2000, the Vietnamese government had formulated a national program to combat diseases. This is also the period that saw clear shifts in the operation and approach of MCNV, focusing more resources on community programs and projects that involve the participation of local residents.
And we had a bit of change in the way MCNV worked, not giving a large amount of money to disease control, but now really working on developing the system and supporting communities to take action for their own health.
Many community-centered projects have been implemented in such fields as rehabilitation for people with disabilities, gender, livelihoods, nutrition, etc.
Một cái thay đổi lớn nhất ở đây là cái thay đổi trong cách tiếp cận về chăm sóc sức khỏe cộng đồng và cái thay đổi cái nhận thức của các nhà quản lý y tế cũng như là người dân trong cái vấn đề là cùng tham gia quyết định việc chăm sóc sức khỏe dựa vào cái nguồn lực sẵn có của cộng đồng mình, và đây cũng là một cái cách mà để cho người dân tự giác trong vấn đề là tham gia cái vai trò của mình trong vấn đề tự chăm sóc sức khỏe.
Not only in Quảng Trị, but also in many other provinces, people who received benefits became the public relations staff for the project. Mang Thị Sự in Phú Yên province is one of them.
Món nào mà có màu sắc rực rỡ nó thích. Thì nó một bữa mà nó ăn được một chén hay là một chén rưỡi gì thôi, trong lòng mình vui lắm. Tự nhiên nó sướng sao á, mà bữa mà không ép ăn mà không có muốn nuốt, không muốn ăn, tự nhiên mình bắt muốn đánh, bắt buồn sao á. Nó tự ăn xong rồi tự lên cân, nó nói mẹ bao nhiêu cân rồi, con bao nhiêu cân rồi. Cũng nói một tạ vậy. Ấy phỉnh nó giữ với nó.
Các mẹ cho ăn á, thì mẹ chỉ nấu chung với gia đình luôn. Một mâm cơm thì lớn cũng ăn cái đó, mà bé cũng ăn cái đó. Mà thật ra bé thì không được ăn những cái món đó. Tại vì ăn là nấu thì thức ăn nó không có mềm, thì trẻ không ăn được. Thì từ dẫn đến là trẻ làm biết ăn. Cho nên từ khi mình tham gia vào cái dự án đây thì mình hướng dẫn được họ là cái cách nấu, chế biến cho con, cho gia đình thì họ nấu được và họ làm được.
From a person who did not fully understand, Sự has now become a person who provides advice on nutrition for other mothers in the village.
Nên cái lăng thợ tên thực đơn nên thực đơn dân pre nên thợ lăng mà tôi cái.
One person changed, then one group. Gradually, groups of 5 to 6 mothers were formed. Monthly or weekly, the group of mothers sit together to update the situation of malnourished children in the villages or share the ways of cooking nutritional food.
After the 2000s, there was a shift in the approach that MCNV had in its work here in Vietnam. What was that shift, if you may share with us, Ron?
Of course, it was not a sudden change. It was a gradual change. Because around 2000, or already a little bit before that, of course, we focused even more on the groups in Vietnam which needed it most. Because Vietnam was developing very fast, and especially in the cities, you saw a lot of populations, of course, getting a better life. And we focused on the groups who needed it most. And that means both the ethnic minorities in the mountain areas, but also groups like people with disabilities, which we have been working also a long time on. People who are gay, lesbian, and things like that came later in that. So all kinds of groups who had a difficult time in following the development of Vietnam.
Yes.
And in order to work on that most effectively, certainly it's not a matter of dividing material things or even money. It requires a kind of awareness building, both in the general population and in those groups themselves, that they become more self-confident to speak out their minds and ask for what they need. And that required quite a different way of thinking and way of working. And I think our office in Quang Tri in that time, which was established about just before 2000, and my colleague Agnes Gebhardt has been doing very innovative work in how to work with people who from most vulnerable groups and make them stronger.
Yes.
And I think that has been pioneered by them, and we called it community managed health development, and our program later also was called community managed livelihood development. Mm-hmm. We focused on the group themselves, the people themselves. They have to decide finally what they want and what kind of village plans they want to make or how they want to improve the situation. We have been working for a long time along those lines to make weak groups of people internally stronger so that they could overcome their problems.
Yes.
MCNV is currently working on 4 areas: health development, social inclusion, entrepreneurship and value change, and livelihoods and climate change, in line with its 50-year vision and mission towards the Sustainable Development Goals.
MCNV is very ambitious. We want to develop further, and we do that through partnerships. We are developing more partnerships with local parties, cooperatives, local governments, CBOs, but also with business partners, local and international partners.
MCNV started with solidarity. I think that makes us very different from all the other NGOs. MCNV works in Vietnam.
The relationship between the medical committee, Netherlands and Vietnam, is not only a very long-lasting relationship, but I think it's also an example of the good relations that the Netherlands and Vietnam have. It's an example of how organizations in general can work together for the good of all.
For the next phase of MCNV, now that it has marked its milestone of 50 years, what do you hope for the future of the organization?
Well, I think so many things have changed again in the last 10 years. That also the priorities for what you work on will always have to be adapt. And of course, nowadays I think there is no bigger priority than the environment.
Yes.
And even though working with the weak groups and the vulnerable groups is still important, because they will also suffer most from things like climate change. The farmers in the Mekong Delta have a lot of problems with salinization of the land, things like that. The world is going to warm up, and Vietnam is going to suffer a lot from that. And we really need to both help the people become aware of that, but also the politicians to become aware of that, and that there will be very necessary policy changes have to be made. Not only in Vietnam, everywhere, my country, as certainly as much as here.
Yes.
But that is, I think, for the future generations, the most important thing.
Yes. So thank you so much to you both and to the Medical Committee Netherlands Vietnam for the 50 years of fostering this friendship between the Netherlands and Vietnam, of supporting Vietnam, you know, from the days of the war until now, and continuing on in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you also for your very pleasant conversation.
Thank you very much. When war in Vietnam stepped into one of its most brutal stages, it was through MCNV that a seedling of friendship was sowed by the people of the Netherlands who had a love for Vietnam. It is thanks to the support of sponsors, partners, and the tireless work of volunteers and MCNV team members like Ad Spikers and Ron Marchand that this seedling has today grown into a sturdy tree, lush and green in its half-a-century journey, symbolizing not only MCNV's efforts, but also the friendship and solidarity between the Netherlands and Vietnam. We do hope you've enjoyed learning more about MCNV and its journey. We thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you more next time here on Talk Vietnam. Goodbye for now.